You ever heard of an HOA sending out fake cops? Sounds crazy, right? But before we get to that part, let me take you back to how this whole nightmare even started. It didn't begin with thugs in reflective vests or pounding fists on my front door. It began with envelopes. Thin, white, official-looking envelopes slid into my mailbox one after another like clockwork. The first one, I tore open standing at the end of my driveway. The sun was hot on the back of my neck, and the envelope felt too light to be anything good. Inside, in neat black print, it read, "Violation notice, improper vehicle placement. Fine, $150. My jaw tightened. Vehicle placement? My truck sat right there in my own driveway, exactly where it always did. Not blocking the road, not parked on the grass, not anywhere near a fire hydrant. Just in front of my own garage. I crumpled the paper in my fist, muttering under my breath. The second envelope came 2 days later. This one was even bolder. Violation notice, excessive grass length. Fine, $200. I laughed, sharp and bitter, because I'd mowed the yard just the day before. My lawn was neat, trimmed, and greener than half the lawns on the street. I started to realize this wasn't about grass. This wasn't about trucks. This was about control. Then came the third envelope, and that one nearly made me choke. Final warning, possible eviction. Eviction. On land that wasn't even inside their HOA boundaries. That's right, my property sat just outside Oakfield Estates Covenant. Their bylaws had no authority over me. But that didn't stop them from sliding these fake legal threats into my box like they were the IRS. I wasn't amused. I was furious. And when I'm furious, I don't sit quietly. That afternoon, I marched straight into their clubhouse. The double doors creaked as I shoved them open, the smell of stale coffee and cheap carpet glue hitting me like a wall. Inside, at the end of a long oak table, sat Sandra Hull, the vice president of Oakfield Estates HOA. Sandra was the type who loved power more than people. She strutted around the neighborhood with a leather binder tucked under her arm like it was a badge, constantly quoting bylaws and rules she half understood. In her mind, she was the keeper of order, the neighborhood's standard-bearer. In reality, she was nothing but a bully in a blouse. At her side were two board members who looked like they wanted to be anywhere else, tired eyes, slouched shoulders, the permanent look of people dragged into a mess they didn't sign up for. I slapped the stack of envelopes down on the polished oak, my voice echoing in the empty clubhouse. 3 fines in 1 week, Sandra. 3. And you know what the funny part is? I'm not even in your HOA. You don't have jurisdiction over me. This is harassment. Sandra's smirk didn't even twitch. She leaned back, fingers tapping the binder like a judge about to deliver a sentence. Our community has expectations, she said smoothly. Your property borders ours. Your behavior reflects on us. If you won't comply, we'll escalate. I leaned forward, voice low and sharp. Escalate to what? You've got no jurisdiction. You can't touch me. Her eyes hardened, the fake smile fading into something sharper, nastier. You think living just outside our covenant protects you? You'll see what happens when someone ignores community standards. We can make your life very difficult. There it was. A threat dressed up as policy. The board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, but not one of them spoke up. Sandra was running the show, and they were her silent audience. I gathered the papers, shoving them back into my folder. My pulse thumped tight in my neck, but I kept my voice steady. Keep your threats, Sandra. You've got nothing on me. And you'd better stop before this goes somewhere you don't want it to. Her smirk returned, faint but cold. She didn't say a word as I walked out, but I could feel her eyes on my back like a claw. That was the moment I knew it wouldn't stop here. People like Sandra never back down on their own. They only stop when they're forced to. The papers crinkled in my fist as I crossed the parking lot, the sun glaring off windshields. Behind me, the clubhouse doors creaked shut, muffling whatever smug little smile Sandra was wearing now. She'd drawn the line. I knew she was going to push harder. And I knew the next time, it wasn't going to be just letters in a mailbox. A week later, my suitcase sat open on the bed, clothes folded into neat stacks, contracts and travel documents clipped inside a worn leather folder. It was just another job assignment out of state, 2 weeks of long hours but enough pay to keep food on the table and the mortgage covered. Traveling wasn't optional for me. It was how we survived. But as I zipped the bag shut, I couldn't shake the unease that had been chewing at the back of my mind since my run-in with Sandra. The fines, the threats, that smug little smirk, none of it felt finished. Sandra Hull was the type to double down, not back off. Downstairs, my daughter Emily sat at the kitchen table, a laptop open in front of her. At 21, she was sharp as a tack, calm, level-headed, with her mother's eyes and a wit that could cut glass. She glanced up when I came in, pulling out one earbud. "You leaving tomorrow morning?" she asked. Early, I nodded, lowering myself into the chair across from her. "Flight's at 6. I'll be gone about 10 days, maybe 12. She frowned slightly. "And you're still worried about Sandra?" It wasn't even a question. Emily read me too well. "Yeah," I admitted. "She's not done. Those fines were just the start. People like her, they don't stop unless someone makes them." Emily set her pen down. "So what do you want me to do while you're gone?" I leaned forward, my voice steady but firm. "Keep the doors locked at all times. Don't answer the door for anyone unless it's Sheriff Dalton himself. If anything happens, anything at all, you call him immediately. He knows what's been going on." She nodded, calm as ever. No panic, no dramatics. Emily had always had that rare kind of composure, the kind you either inherit or earn. But she didn't know what I didn't tell her. Because what I hadn't mentioned yet was Ryan. My son. Emily's older brother. Ryan had been gone for months on deployment. Navy SEAL, disciplined, tough as steel, the kind of man no one wanted to cross. He hadn't told anyone when he was coming home, not even me. Said he wanted it to be a surprise. All I knew was he was stateside again, and he might be dropping by any day. I figured, if anything did happen while I was away, Sandra and her clipboard cronies would be in for a surprise they wouldn't soon forget. Still, I didn't want to lean on that. Ryan had seen enough combat zones to last a lifetime. The last thing he needed was neighborhood drama waiting for him. I reached across the table, placing my hand over Emily's. "You'll be fine. Just stay sharp. Don't open that door unless you're sure. Understand?" She squeezed my hand back. "Got it, Dad. Don't worry. I can handle Sandra." I smiled faintly, though the knot in my chest stayed tight. "I know you can. But handling Sandra and handling whoever she might drag into this aren't the same thing." That earned me a raised brow. "What's that supposed to mean?" I hesitated, choosing my words. "She's been whispering with people. Not board members. Outsiders. And not the kind of people you want hanging around a neighborhood. If she tries anything while I'm gone, she might not come herself. She might send someone else." Emily's jaw set, stubborn like her mother's had been. "Then let her try. We're not scared of her." I chuckled, though there wasn't much humor in it. "That's the spirit. But still, don't take chances. Promise me." "I promise." That night, after dinner, I stood at the window looking out at the dark street. Lawns trimmed, sprinklers ticking in the distance, porch lights glowing warm and steady. On the surface, Oakfield Estates looked like a picture-perfect suburban dream. But I knew better. Behind those hedges and fences, behind those tidy white shutters, there was rot. Sandra Hull was at the center of it, and she wasn't finished. I left early the next morning, suitcase in hand, the sky still dark. Emily hugged me at the door, and I kissed the top of her head. "Remember," I said, "lock doors. Sheriff Dalton if anything happens." "Got it, Dad. Safe travels. I drove away, headlights cutting through the mist, the house shrinking in the rearview mirror. I told myself everything would be fine. Emily was smart, careful, not easily rattled. And maybe I was wrong, maybe Sandra would let things go, let her obsession fade. But as the miles rolled by and the city swallowed me up, a cold thought settled in the pit of my stomach. Sandra wasn't the type to let things go. And the next time she knocked on my door, it wouldn't be with envelopes. 2 days into my trip, I got the first phone call. I was sitting in a motel room 3 states away, paperwork spread across the desk, when my phone buzzed. The name on the screen made my stomach tighten, Mrs. Keller, my next-door neighbor. She wasn't the type to call unless something was truly wrong. I answered on the first ring. "Everything okay?" Her voice was low, urgent. "You need to know what's going on back here. Sandra's been busy." That got my attention. "Busy how?" "I saw her yesterday," Mrs. Keller whispered. "Not with board members. With 3 men I've never seen before. They weren't dressed for a board meeting. Rough-looking. Tattoos, hard faces. They met outside the clubhouse. She was pointing toward your street, toward your house. They stood there whispering for almost half an hour." My pulse kicked up. Sandra was escalating. I pressed my fingers to my temple. Did anyone else see this? Yes. The Carsons saw them too. None of us recognized those men. They're not from around here. I thanked her, promised to stay in touch, and hung up. For the rest of the night, I stared at my hotel ceiling, a knot of unease sitting heavy in my chest. Sandra had been threatening. Now she was recruiting muscle. The next morning, a new message came, this time from another neighbor, Kevin, 2 doors down. He snapped a photo and sent it straight to me. A white SUV. No plates on the front, dark tinted windows, parked just far enough from my driveway to look casual but close enough to make its interest obvious. "They've been circling since last night," Kevin's message read. 3 guys inside. Never seen them before. They keep slowing down in front of your house. The photo told me everything I needed to know. Sandra wasn't bluffing anymore. She'd moved past fines and empty threats. She was testing intimidation. But what she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Emily wasn't alone. My son Ryan had come home. He'd texted me late the night before, finally letting me know he'd returned from deployment. His exact words: "Don't tell Emily. Want to surprise her. I'll be home tomorrow. Keep it between us." I stared at that text for a long time, a strange mix of relief and dread filling me. Relief, because if Sandra tried anything, Ryan was the one man I trusted to handle it. Dread, because he'd just come back from the kind of places most people can't even imagine. The last thing he needed was a neighborhood feud turning violent. Back home, the neighborhood buzzed with rumors. People whispered about the SUV, about Sandra's late-night meetings, about the men who didn't belong. A few neighbors quietly admitted they were scared. If Sandra was willing to bring outsiders into Oakfield Estates, then what was next? That afternoon, Emily called me. Her voice was calm, but I could hear the tightness in it. "Dad, that SUV people told you about? It was back again today. Parked right across from the driveway. 3 guys inside wearing reflective vests. They got something printed on the back, looks like it says HOA cop." I stopped cold. HOA cop? Yeah. Like some kind of uniform. Except it's cheap vinyl lettering, like they ironed it on in someone's garage. They kept watching the house. Didn't get up this time. Just sat there, staring. My hand tightened around the phone. I wanted to be there more than anything. But all I could do was tell her, stay inside. Keep the doors locked. Sheriff Dalton already knows the situation. If they step foot on the property, call him immediately. I will, Emily said. A pause, then, don't worry. I'm not scared. Her steadiness made me proud, but it didn't ease the worry gnawing in my chest. I hung up and sat on the edge of the motel bed, staring at the cheap wallpaper. Sandra had crossed a line. She wasn't just harassing us with paper anymore. She'd gone from HOA fines to impersonating authority. From petty bully to full-blown criminal. And she had no idea that Ryan was about to step into the middle of it. The storm was coming. Thursday afternoon in Oakfield Estates was as ordinary as it could get. Sprinklers ticked in rhythmic arcs across perfect lawns. Delivery trucks rumbled down the street. Kids' bicycles lay abandoned in driveways while their owners sat in classrooms across town. Inside my house, Emily sat at the kitchen table, books and highlighters spread around her like a fortress. She'd taken my instructions to heart, doors locked, phone close by, blinds half drawn. She wasn't the type to scare easily. Still, she kept her earbuds out, listening for any sound out of place. It came just after 2. The crunch of tires on gravel. Through the slats of the blinds, Emily spotted it, the white SUV neighbors had warned us about. It rolled up bold as anything, stopping at the edge of the driveway. The engine cut. Doors opened. 3 men stepped out. They wore reflective vests, cheap and flimsy, with the words HOA cop stenciled across the back in crooked vinyl letters. One carried a clipboard, another had a baton swinging from his belt, and the third cracked his knuckles like he'd been waiting all day for trouble. Emily's breath caught, but her hands were steady as she grabbed her phone and hit record. The men marched up the walkway like they owned the place. The first one pounded on the door so hard the frame rattled. HOA cop, he barked. Open up. You're in violation. Emily didn't move. Didn't unlock. She called through the door, her voice calm and even. You're not real officers. Clipboard guy sneered. We've had multiple violations on this property. Improper parking. Grass length. Refusal to comply. If you don't cooperate, we'll have no choice but to remove you. Emily's reply was sharp. Try it. That's when everything turned. The man on the right, the knucklecracker, snarled. Don't get smart, girl. And when Emily cracked the door just an inch to keep eye contact, he lashed out. His hand shot forward, slapping her across the face so hard she stumbled backward against the wall. The sound of the hit carried through the house, through the hall, through the kitchen, through the garage. Where Ryan was. He had been unpacking his gear in silence, not ready to tell Emily he was home, wanting to surprise her later. But when he heard the crack of that slap, something inside him shifted. The garage door banged open, and Ryan stormed out, 6'2" of navy-honed muscle, jaw tight, eyes locked on the men at the door. You just hit my sister, he growled, his voice low but dangerous. The fake cops froze. They hadn't expected resistance. Certainly not from someone like him. Back off, man, clipboard guy stammered, trying to bluff. This is HOA business. Knucklecracker reached for his baton. Ryan didn't wait. Years of combat reflexes snapped into place. He closed the distance in 2 strides and drove his fist straight into the thug's gut. Air whooshed out of him like a punctured balloon, and the baton clattered to the porch. The second man lunged, swinging wild, but Ryan caught his arm mid-strike, twisted, and slammed him face first into the porch rail. A crack echoed, the sound of cartilage giving way, and the man howled, blood pouring from his nose. The third, clipboard still in hand, panicked. He swung it like a weapon, desperate. Ryan sidestepped cleanly, grabbed the back of his vest, and yanked him down hard onto the gravel driveway. The man hit the ground flat, the air knocked out of him, smugness gone in an instant. Neighbors spilled out of their houses, phones raised, recording every brutal second. Whispers spread, shutters clicked, video rolled. Emily stood in the doorway, cheek red from the slap, her phone steady in her hand. She hadn't stopped recording. Ryan stood tall over the 3 groaning men, fists clenched, voice like steel. You're done. You touch my family again, and it won't just be broken noses. It'll be prison bars. And that was the exact moment Sandra appeared. She came storming down the street, binder clutched tight against her chest, heels clicking furiously against the pavement. Her eyes widened when she saw the scene, her hired thugs sprawled on the ground, neighbors gathered in clusters, and Ryan, towering, unshaken, daring anyone to move. Her perfect little intimidation scheme was crumbling in front of half the neighborhood. But Sandra hadn't realized yet, the real authorities were already on their way. The silence after the fight was sharp, electric. Only the sound of the 3 fake cops groaning on the ground broke it. Ryan stood at the center of it all, chest heaving just once before his breathing slowed back into perfect control, the way the Navy had trained him. Emily was still at the door, one hand against her cheek, but her eyes were locked on her brother. For a moment, she wasn't the girl who had been slapped. She was the proud sister, watching the big brother she hadn't seen in nearly a year appear out of nowhere and dismantle 3 grown men like they were nothing. The neighbors couldn't believe it either. Phones were out. Some whispered in awe. Others gasped at the sheer speed of what they'd just witnessed. Nobody in Oakfield Estates had ever seen anything like this. And then Sandra arrived. She stormed across the cul-de-sac, heels stabbing the pavement, binder clutched like a sword. Her face was blotched red, her carefully arranged hair bouncing with every angry step. "What is going on here?" she shrieked, voice carrying across the lawns. Ryan didn't even turn his head. He simply pointed at her thugs. "These 3 assaulted my sister. On my property." Sandra's jaw clenched. "Don't you dare talk to me like that. I own this neighborhood." The neighbors muttered among themselves. Sandra had always acted like a queen, but today her mask was slipping. One of the bruised men groaned, spitting blood into the gravel. "Miss Sandra, we didn't know her brother was here." That was the wrong thing to say. The entire crowd's attention pivoted. Brows furrowed. Phones zoomed in. This wasn't about enforcing grass length or trash bins anymore. It was about Sandra hiring muscle to intimidate a teenage girl while her father was away. Emily's voice rang out, clear and unwavering, "They slapped me. Right here. On my face." She tilted her head so the red mark showed in the afternoon sun. Gasps rippled through the neighbors. Someone shouted, "Call the sheriff." Another yelled, "Already did." Sandra paled, but she wasn't done yet. She straightened her blazer, lifted her chin, and tried to regain control. These men were contracted officers. This family is in violation, and I. "Stop!" Ryan's single word cut through her rant like a blade. He stepped forward, towering over her, eyes hard. "You sent fake cops to my house. You let them lay hands on my sister. That makes you responsible." Sandra's voice wavered for the first time. "Why you don't scare me? This neighborhood answers to me. Not to you." Ryan leaned in, his voice low but carrying enough for everyone around to hear. "Lady, I've stared down cartel bosses and insurgents who thought they were untouchable. Every single one of them thought the same thing you do, that nobody could touch them. You know where they are now?" Sandra's lip trembled, though she tried to hide it. "In prison," Ryan finished, his voice like iron. The crowd erupted in murmurs. Sandra's veneer of control crumbled under the weight of Ryan's words. Emily finally stepped onto the porch beside him, phone still recording. Her voice was steady but edged with fury. "You picked the wrong family. You thought I was alone. You thought you could scare me. But you didn't know my brother was home." A cheer went up from across the street. Some clapped. Others shouted encouragement. The HOA president had never looked so small. Sandra's binder shook in her hands. "This is harassment. I'll sue every last one of you." Ryan smirked, the kind of smirk only a man who knew he was in complete control could give. "Go ahead. The sheriff will be here any second. You'll be the one in cuffs." And right on cue, sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder with every passing second. Sandra's eyes darted from the thugs on the ground to the neighbors filming her every twitch to Ryan, unflinching, immovable, a seal standing guard at his family's door. For the first time since she took power, Sandra looked afraid. The sound of sirens sliced through the afternoon calm, echoing down Oakfield Estates like a war drum. Neighbors crowded closer, phones raised high, whispering, pointing, catching every angle. Sandra stood rigid, clutching her binder as though it were a shield, her knuckles white. Her 3 hired thugs were still sprawled in the driveway, bloody, beaten, and whimpering. Ryan hadn't moved from his stance at the base of the porch. His arms were crossed now, but his eyes stayed locked on Sandra, calm and unyielding, like a wolf waiting for the right moment. Emily stood at his side, recording everything with steady hands. The red mark on her cheek glared against her pale skin, a silent testimony no one could ignore. The first patrol car rolled in, lights flashing red and blue against manicured lawns. Then another. The cul-de-sac filled fast, 2 sheriff's SUVs, a deputy car, and finally, Sheriff Dalton himself. Dalton wasn't the kind of man who got flustered easily. Broad shoulders, weathered face, eyes that had seen it all. He stepped out of his truck and adjusted his Stetson, surveying the scene in one long sweep. His gaze landed on Sandra first. "What the hell is going on here, Sandra?" His voice was gravel, low and unimpressed. Sandra's response was instant, desperate. "Sheriff, thank God you're here. These people attack my contractors. This family is in violation, and when my officers—" Dalton cut her off with a bark of laughter. "Your officers?" He jabbed a thumb at the men on the ground. "You mean those clowns dressed in dollar store vests? Sandra, those aren't cops. Those are criminals playing dress up." The neighbors chuckled, murmurs of agreement rippling through the crowd. Phones zoomed in on Sandra's face, catching every twitch of her jaw. Ryan stepped forward, calm but commanding. "Sheriff, my sister was alone when these men showed up. They claimed to be law enforcement, forced their way onto my porch, and when she refused to comply, one of them slapped her." Dalton's head snapped toward Emily. His voice softened. "That true, miss?" Emily held her phone up. "It's all on video. Every second." Dalton nodded, his face tightening. "Good girl." He turned back to his deputies, voice sharp. "Cuff him." The groaning men tried to protest as deputies hauled them up, twisting their arms behind their backs and snapping on cuffs. One yelped about injuries, another begged Sandra for help, but Dalton didn't care. Sandra, though, wasn't ready to give up. She stepped forward, binder raised like evidence. "Sheriff, this is HOA business. I was enforcing community rules, and this family—" Dalton's patience snapped. "Enforcing rules? By hiring imposters to assault a teenage girl? You've lost your damn mind, Sandra." He looked at her like she was dirt under his boots. "This isn't HOA territory. This is my county. And in my county, you don't get to play dictator." The neighbors erupted into cheers. For years, they had watched Sandra bully, fine, and threaten everyone in sight. Finally, someone with real authority was calling her out. Ryan's gaze stayed locked on her, unblinking. "You crossed a line, Sandra. You thought we were easy targets. You thought my sister was weak. But you didn't know I was home." Sandra tried one last time. Her voice rose, shrill and cracking. "This is all being twisted. I had every right." Dalton stepped forward, his bulk dwarfing her. "Sandra, if you keep talking, the only right you'll have is to remain silent. Understand me?" Her mouth snapped shut. The deputies led the 3 imposters to waiting vehicles, their vests flapping like flags of shame. Dalton turned to Emily. "You want to press charges, miss?" Emily's voice didn't waver. "Absolutely." Dalton tipped his hat, respect in his eyes. "Good. We'll make sure this sticks. You did right by recording." Sandra looked around, realizing too late that the tide had fully turned. Every neighbor had their phone trained on her. Every whisper was her downfall. She was no longer the ruler of Oakfield Estates, she was the villain, caught in the act, exposed in daylight. Ryan stepped closer, his voice a low promise only she could hear. "This isn't over for you. But it's damn sure over for your HOA reign." Sheriff Dalton signaled to a deputy. "Escort Miss Sandra to her office. I'll be there to collect every file, every record. If I find one more illegal stunt, she's the next one in cuffs." Sandra's face drained of color. The binder slipped slightly in her grip, but she clutched it tighter, muttering something only she could hear. But the crowd had already made its decision. They weren't afraid of her anymore. And standing on that porch, with his sister beside him and the sheriff's men hauling crooks away, Ryan knew Oakfield Estates would never be the same again. The night after the arrests, Oakfield Estates felt different. For the first time in years, neighbors walked their dogs without glancing nervously at Sandra's house. Parents lingered on porches, talking openly, no longer worried about HOA spies reporting them for unsanctioned lawn ornaments or improper mailbox colors. The entire community buzzed with one subject, Sandra Hole. By morning, the headlines were everywhere. HOA VP accused of hiring fake police. Homeowner's daughter assaulted in impersonation scheme. Local stations ran the footage Emily had streamed, neighbors' cell phone clips filling in every angle. Reporters replayed the moment the fake HOA cops were cuffed and shoved into patrol cars, the way Ryan had taken them apart in seconds, and the stunned look on Sandra's face when Dalton dressed her down. The HOA board scrambled. An emergency meeting was called in the clubhouse, the same room where Sandra had once sat at the head of the oak table, issuing threats with her binder like commandments. This time, the room was overflowing with furious homeowners. The smell of burnt coffee was the same, but the energy was electric, angry. Board President Harold Simmons looked like he hadn't slept. His tie was loose, sweat beading on his forehead. He cleared his throat and tried to speak, but the crowd shouted him down. "Where's Sandra?" one neighbor demanded. "She nearly got a girl killed," another shouted. Harold raised both hands. "Sandra Hole has been suspended from all HOA duties, effective immediately." The crowd roared. Some clapped, others cursed, but all of them wanted more. "She should be arrested," a woman yelled from the back. Harold grimaced. "Sheriff Dalton is handling the criminal side. We had no knowledge of her actions." But no one believed that. The board had enabled her for years, nodding silently while she targeted whoever she pleased. Now, they were scrambling to save themselves. In the front row, Ryan sat with Emily. Her cheek was still bruised, but her chin was high, her phone recording everything again. They weren't just witnesses anymore, they were the proof that Sandra's reign of intimidation had ended. The floor was open to homeowners, and the floodgates burst. "I got fined for parking my truck 2 inches over the line, $200. She threatened me with eviction over a garden shed. She told my daughter she couldn't play basketball in the driveway because it wasn't aesthetic." Every voice was another nail in Sandra's coffin. Finally, Harold sagged, defeated. "A motion has been filed to remove Sandra Hole permanently from the board. Effective today, she no longer represents Oakfield Estates in any capacity." The room erupted in cheers. It was done. Sandra's grip had been broken. But the legal storm was just beginning. 2 days later, Sheriff Dalton stood in front of a bank of microphones. Emily and Ryan flanked him, their presence turning what could have been just another press conference into a spectacle. 3 individuals have been charged with felony impersonation of law enforcement, assault, and trespassing, Dalton announced. Each faces up to 5 years in prison and fines of up to $10,000. As for Miss Hole, he paused, letting the silence build. She faces charges of conspiracy to commit assault, incitement, and civil harassment. Her bond has been set at $50,000. Gasps rippled through the reporters. Sandra wasn't just suspended, she was a criminal defendant now. Dalton turned slightly toward Emily. This young lady had the courage to stand firm, record evidence, and refuse to be intimidated. Her actions ensured justice. We owe her our respect. Emily's phone trembled in her hands, not from fear, but pride. Ryan's hand rested lightly on her shoulder, steady as ever. The community finally saw the truth. Sandra wasn't a protector of standards. She was a bully exposed, stripped of her power and dignity. The fallout was swift and brutal. Sandra's name was splashed across the news, her binder mocked online with memes, neighborhood dictator loses her throne. Parents whispered about her in grocery store aisles. Neighbors who once cowered now laughed openly. Her power was gone, reduced to court dates and shame. Ryan, meanwhile, had become something of a local hero. Strangers shook his hand in coffee shops. Veterans saluted him when he passed. Kids whispered, "That's the guy who beat up the fake cops." For Emily, the respect came quieter but deeper. She was no longer just the daughter. She was the one who'd stood tall with nothing but her phone and her resolve. At home, late that evening, I finally returned from my trip. The house was quiet, the air carrying a new kind of peace. I pulled Emily into my arms, then Ryan. "You both did more than I ever could have asked," I said, my voice catching. "Sandra tried to break this family, and instead she broke herself." Ryan shrugged, calm as always. "Bullies only win until someone stands up." And Emily, her eyes fierce despite the bruise, added softly, "She picked the wrong family." The courthouse steps were crowded that morning. Reporters jostled for position, cameras flashing as though Sandra Hull were a celebrity instead of a disgraced HOA tyrant. She tried to stride past them in her usual way, binder clutched to her chest, but the confidence was gone. Her eyes darted, her shoulders slumped. The Queen of Oakfield Estates was walking into judgment. Inside, the trial was swift. Evidence piled high, Emily's video, neighbors' recordings, sworn statements from half the community. Ryan's testimony sealed it, a Navy SEAL describing how his sister was assaulted by hired imposters while Sandra orchestrated the scheme. Sandra's defense attorney tried everything. He argued it was miscommunication, that the men weren't really hired as fake cops but contract security. He claimed the binder notes proved she intended to enforce community safety, not harass. But every page of that binder betrayed her, handwritten fines, names of problem families, even notes about pressuring the narrator's family into compliance. The jury didn't take long. Guilty on conspiracy. Guilty on harassment. Guilty on incitement. When the judge read her sentence, probation, a $50,000 restitution order to Emily, and a permanent ban from serving on any HOA board, Sandra's face drained of all color. No binder, no bylaw, no fake cop vest could save her now. The fallout rippled through Oakfield Estates. At the next HOA meeting, Harold Simmons stepped to the podium, a humbled man. "We failed you," he admitted, voice cracking through the microphone. "This board allowed one person to abuse her authority, and we all looked away. That ends today. From this moment forward, fines will be reviewed by a neutral committee. No one will ever face harassment in the name of community standards again." The neighbors erupted in applause. Not polite clapping, real cheers, stomping feet, hands raised in victory. The reign of fear was over. Ryan and Emily sat quietly in the back, watching the shift. For years, people had whispered complaints, afraid to challenge Sandra. Now, they were united, voices loud, reclaiming their neighborhood. Emily leaned toward her brother. "It feels different, doesn't it? Like the air's lighter." Ryan smiled, rare and genuine. "That's what happens when bullies fall. Everyone else can breathe again." Life slowly returned to normal, or at least, a new version of normal. The fine stopped. Mailboxes no longer carried threats. Neighbors waved freely, grateful instead of suspicious. But the story didn't end at the property line. Emily's live stream had gone viral. Hundreds of thousands watched as a young woman stood her ground and a Navy SEAL defended his family against fake cops. Comments poured in from around the world. "This is why HOAs need oversight. Respect to that SEAL and his sister, true heroes." Sandra thought she was untouchable. Not anymore. What started as a neighborhood battle became a lesson broadcast globally. Intimidation only works until someone shines a light on it. One evening, weeks later, I sat on the porch with Ryan and Emily. The sun dipped low, turning the sky orange and gold. The yard was quiet, peaceful in a way it hadn't been for years. "You know," I said, sipping coffee, "I worried the whole time I was gone. I thought leaving you here with Sandra circling was reckless. But you both proved something I should have known." Emily tilted her head. "What's that?" "That this family doesn't break. Not from fines, not from threats, not from anyone pretending to be bigger than the law." Ryan leaned back, eyes scanning the quiet street. "Sandra forgot one thing. Power only works if people believe in it. The second you call a bluff, the whole thing collapses." Emily smiled, soft but fierce. "And she picked the wrong family to bluff." The three of us sat in silence after that, the kind of silence that isn't empty but full of pride, relief, and the certainty that whatever came next, we'd face it together. In the end, Oakfield Estates wasn't just a neighborhood anymore. It was a place that remembered. Remembered the fines, the threats, the fake cops, and the family that stood up and said no more. Sandra's binder was gone, her reputation shattered. But the lesson remained: no HOA, no bully, no self-appointed standard-bearer was above the law. And some families? Some families fight back. Legally, morally, and, if pushed far enough, physically.